The final stage of Lyria's journey arrived quietly, without any dramatic warning. The palace had grown used to seeing her walking in the gardens, talking with her father, and laughing softly with the servants. It almost felt as if the years of illness had been a bad dream. But Daniel knew this was the most important time, because the real test was not whether she could recover with help, but whether her body could remain strong without any more treatments. 1. Morning. Daniel visited her chambers to run a full set of scans. Lyria was sitting by the window, sunlight spilling across her face. She looked healthy, her skin glowing with color, her eyes bright. When he told her it was time for the final examination, she didn't hesitate. "Let's do it," she said with a steady voice. The tests took hours. Daniel checked every detail: her organ functions, blood flow, immune strength, and energy levels. The alien healers also performed their own readings, using patterns of light and vibration to sense any hidden weakness. Finally, all the results were in. Daniel looked at the king and Lyria, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then he smiled. "She's stable, stronger than she's ever been since I arrived. The illness is gone." The king's eyes glistened, and for the first time in many years, he embraced his daughter without fear of hurting her. "You have given me my child back," he told Daniel, his voice heavy with emotion. But Lyria's reaction was quieter. She simply turned to Daniel and said, "Then I suppose it's time for the moonflowers and the ocean?" Daniel laughed softly. "I think it is." The king, true to his word, arranged for a small journey. A royal cruiser would take them across the planet to the coast, one of the rare places where the land met a vast, glittering sea. Lyria had never been there before. In fact, she had never left the palace since she fell ill as a child. The thought of traveling excited her, but Daniel made sure she prepared carefully, bringing everything they might need to keep her comfortable. The journey took a full day. From the cruiser's windows, Lyria watched the changing landscapes. Rolling hills, silver rivers, and forests of tall, crystal-like trees that caught the sunlight and scattered it in rainbow colors. Daniel sat beside her, answering her endless questions about the plants, the animals, and how it compared to Earth. When they finally reached the coast, the sight took Lyria's breath away. The alien ocean stretched out endlessly, its surface shimmering in shades of deep blue and green under the twin suns. The sound of the waves was soft and rhythmic, unlike anything she had heard before. The air smelled fresh and cool, carrying a faint sweetness from the nearby flowering cliffs. Daniel helped her step onto the soft, pale sand. She stood there for a moment, just feeling the ground beneath her feet. "It's strange," she said. "For so long my world was one room, one bed. Now it's this." They walked slowly along the shore. Small, delicate creatures darted in the shallow water, and seashells shaped like tiny stars washed up with the waves. Lyria picked one up and studied it, smiling as the sunlight caught its surface. "Do you remember?" she asked. "When I told you I'd make a wish for you?" Daniel nodded. "That I'd find something worth staying for." She looked at him seriously. "Did you?" He glanced out at the ocean before answering. "Yes. I found people who taught me that medicine isn't just about healing bodies, it's about healing hearts. And I found a friend I'd cross any galaxy for." They sat together on a smooth rock, watching the waves roll in. Lyria let the sound fill the silence, her eyes shining with contentment. "Then maybe one day you'll take me to see Earth's ocean," she said. Daniel smiled. "One day I will." Back at the palace, preparations for a grand celebration were underway. The king had invited leaders from neighboring worlds, not just to celebrate his daughter's recovery, but to mark a new era of unity between species. He wanted everyone to see what could happen when two worlds trusted each other. The night of the celebration was magical. Hundreds of lanterns rose into the sky, glowing softly as they drifted toward the stars. Music filled the air, blending human. Instruments Daniel had brought with the melodic harmonies of the alien court. Lyria walked among the guests, no longer the fragile princess hidden away, but a young woman full of life. Many stopped to speak with her, and she greeted each one. Warmly, Daniel stood at the edge of the gathering for a while, watching. He didn't need thanks or attention. Seeing her smile was enough. But the king approached and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Dr. Hayes, my people will remember you for generations. You came to us as a stranger and will leave as family." Daniel bowed his head slightly. "It was an honor, Your Majesty." Later that night, Lyria found him in the gardens. The moonflowers were in full bloom, glowing softly under the twin suns' fading light. She held 2 lanterns in her hands. "One for me, and one for you," she said. They lit the lanterns together, releasing them into the night sky. As they drifted upward, Lyria whispered, "For new beginnings," Daniel added quietly, "and for promises kept." They watched until the lanterns became tiny dots among the stars. In that moment, neither of them thought about the years of sickness or the dangers of the treatment. They only thought about the journey, the friendship, and the hope that had brought them here. And somewhere deep inside, Daniel knew this wasn't an ending at all. It was the start of something even greater. The room was filled with a quiet tension as the third and most critical treatment began. The alien healers formed their circle around the bed, each holding glowing crystals that pulsed with soft light. Daniel stood at Lyria's side, his instruments laid out with precision. The king stood just behind him, his gaze fixed on his daughter. No one spoke. The only sounds were the low hum of the crystals and the steady beeping of Daniel's scanner. Daniel started by adjusting the sensors on Lyria's skin and checking her vital signs. She looked at him calmly, though there was a faint trace of nervousness in her eyes. "Are you ready?" he asked gently. She gave a small nod. "I trust you." That simple sentence gave Daniel a surge of determination. He began the process, slowly injecting the enhanced serum into her bloodstream. The alien healers increased their energy flow, filling the air with a gentle warmth that made the room feel alive. At first, everything went as planned. Her breathing remained steady, her heartbeat strong. But then, halfway through the procedure, the readings on Daniel's scanner began to spike. Her heart rate jumped, and her body started to tremble. Daniel's eyes narrowed as he quickly adjusted the settings on his equipment. "She's fighting it again," he said quietly, though his voice was calm. The king took a step forward. "Is she in danger?" Daniel didn't answer directly. "Not if we keep her stable." He placed a hand gently on Lyria's arm. "Stay with me. Breathe slowly. You're stronger than this." Lyria's eyes fluttered open. She looked at him for a moment, then focused on his voice. The healers adjusted their formation, channeling more energy into her. The glow around her body grew brighter, and the trembling began to lessen. Minutes passed like hours. Sweat rolled down Daniel's forehead as he monitored her condition. Finally, the readings began to drop back into a safe range. Her breathing evened out, and her heartbeat steadied. The energy from the crystals softened again, settling into a gentle rhythm that matched her pulse. When the procedure ended, Lyria was pale but conscious. "Did it work?" she whispered. Daniel allowed himself a small smile. "Yes, it worked better than I hoped." The king let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Thank the stars," he murmured. But Daniel knew the fight wasn't over yet. The treatment is complete, but now her body has to do the real work, healing itself. The next few days will decide if she recovers or not. For the rest of the day, Lyria rested in her chambers. The king stayed by her side, speaking softly to her in their language. Daniel checked on her every few hours, making small adjustments to her care and ensuring her vital signs stayed stable. The alien healers took turns maintaining a low energy flow around her, supporting her recovery. That night, Daniel stood on the palace balcony, looking out at the alien city below. The twin moons hung in the sky, casting a silver glow over the buildings. He thought about Earth, about the life he had left behind, and about how far he had come, not just in distance but in purpose. He realized that this mission had become more than just saving one life. It had shown him the power of trust between strangers. The next morning brought the first real sign of change. Lyria woke early and asked for food, something she hadn't done in months. Daniel watched closely as she ate a small portion of fruit, noting the healthier color in her skin and the strength in her voice. The king's joy was quiet but clear. He clasped Daniel's shoulder in gratitude. Over the next few days, Lyria's improvement became more visible. She could sit up without help, walk short distances with the aid of a servant, and spend more time in the gardens. Daniel continued to monitor her progress, careful not to let her push herself too quickly. The alien healers, once skeptical of human methods, now worked closely with him, blending their knowledge into something greater. One evening, as the suns began to set, Lyria asked Daniel to join her in the gardens. The moonflowers were beginning to open, their petals glowing softly in the twilight. She reached out and touched one gently. "They only bloom for a short time," she said. "But in that time, they're the most beautiful thing in the world." Daniel smiled. "Like moments we can't get back. That's why we have to cherish them." She looked at him thoughtfully. "Do you think this is one of those moments?" He nodded. "Absolutely." They walked slowly through the garden, the air filled with the faint fragrance of the flowers. For the first time since he had arrived, Daniel saw not just a patient, but a young woman rediscovering life. Her steps were careful, but there was a lightness in them that hadn't been there before. As the days turned into a week, her strength continued to return. The palace began to prepare for a celebration, not just for her recovery, but to honor the unity between their world and the human doctor who had made it possible. The king ordered lanterns to be released into the sky, each carrying a message of gratitude. Daniel knew his time here might soon come to an end, but as he looked at Lyria, now able to walk among the moonflowers without assistance, he felt a quiet pride. He had kept his promise. The ocean might still be far away, but the first step had been taken. The final test would come soon, to see if her recovery would last without further treatment. Daniel was ready to face it, but deep down, he believed she would succeed. After all, she had faced the darkness and chosen to fight her way back to the light. And in that choice, she had changed not only her own life, but his as well. The next phase of Lyria's treatment began on a quiet morning, several days after the first procedure. The palace was no longer weighed down with hopeless silence. Servants moved with a lighter step, the healers spoke more openly, and the king's face, though still lined with worry, no longer carried the deep shadow of despair. Even the gardens outside the royal chambers seemed brighter, as if the flowers themselves could sense the change. Lyria was sitting up in bed when Daniel entered the room. She had a blanket draped around her shoulders and a book in her hands. The moment she saw him, she smiled, still faintly, but with a warmth that hadn't been there before. "I've been reading about Earth," she said. "Your oceans sound endless." Daniel pulled a chair beside her. "They feel that way too," he replied. "When you stand on the shore, you can't see the other side. It's like looking into forever." She leaned forward a little. "Someday, if I get well, will you show me?" He met her gaze, knowing the promise would be more than a casual word. "Yes, I will." The second treatment was planned for that afternoon. Daniel had made adjustments to the serum, refining it based on how her body reacted before. This time, he wanted to strengthen her immune system alongside the regeneration process, so her body could handle the changes more smoothly. The alien. Healers prepared their energy crystals once again, and the room filled with the soft hum of their power. Before they began, Daniel explained each step to Lyria. He believed that understanding what was happening gave patients courage. She listened, carefully, asking small questions. Even in her fragile state, her curiosity was alive, and it was becoming one of her greatest strengths. The treatment began smoothly. Daniel's scanner showed that her vital signs were steady, and the regenerative process seemed to start more quickly this time. But midway through, her breathing became shallow, and a faint tremor ran through her fingers. Daniel immediately slowed the process, speaking to her in a calm voice. "You're doing well," he assured her. "Just focus on breathing with me. In and out, slowly." The alien healers increased their energy flow, surrounding her with a gentle warmth. Gradually, her breathing steadied, and the tremor faded. When the treatment ended, Lyria was tired, but alert. She even managed to tease Daniel. "You worry too much," she said with a small smile. "Someone has to," he replied with a hint of a grin. Over the next week, Daniel noticed subtle but important changes. Lyria's appetite returned, a little. She could sit in the garden for short periods, and her laughter, soft and cautious, echoed through the halls again. The king visited her daily, and each time he left the room, there was a faint trace of relief in his expression. One evening, Daniel found Lyria in the palace gardens, sitting on a bench under the moonflowers. A servant had helped her there. She was staring at the night sky, where the twin suns had set, leaving the stars bright and scattered across the heavens. "Do you know what I see when I look at the stars?" she asked without turning. "What?" Daniel asked. "Possibilities," she whispered. "Every one of those lights could be a place where something amazing is happening, maybe even someone like me, sitting somewhere far away looking back at us." Daniel sat beside her. "That's exactly how I've always felt. Every star has a story." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Lyria seemed more at peace than he had ever seen her. But Daniel knew the journey wasn't over. Her body was still fragile, and the next treatment would be the most dangerous yet. That night, he reviewed her scans alone in his quarters. The improvements were real but slow. If they didn't push forward soon, the illness might start to fight back harder. Yet pushing too quickly could undo everything. He thought about Earth medicine, alien healing, and the way both worlds could merge into something stronger. It wasn't just about saving Lyria anymore. It was about proving that when different worlds worked together, they could achieve the impossible. The next morning, Daniel met with the king to discuss the third and most critical stage of treatment. He explained the risks openly. The procedure could place great stress on Lyria's body, and there was a chance she might not be strong enough to endure it. The king listened quietly, his hands clasped behind his back. "Doctor," the king said after a long pause, "my daughter is more than my heir. She is the light of my life. If there is a chance, any chance to save her, I will take it. I trust you." Those words weighed heavily on Daniel. He had earned the king's faith, and he could not fail. In the days before the third procedure, Daniel spent more time with Lyria. They played simple games in the garden when she had the energy. He told her stories about Earth's history, about explorers who sailed across dangerous oceans with no guarantee they'd return. She told him about her planet's festivals, where thousands of lanterns were released into the sky, carrying wishes to the stars. "I'll make a wish for you," she said one afternoon. "And what will you wish?" Daniel asked. "That you'll find something here worth staying for," she replied. Daniel didn't answer right away, but deep inside he already knew that her words were coming true. As the day of the third treatment approached, the palace grew. Quiet again, though this time it wasn't hopeless silence, it was anticipation. Everyone knew this was the moment that could decide everything. The healers prepared their crystals, the king stayed close to his daughter, and Daniel readied the serum. Lyria, despite the seriousness of it all, greeted him with the same calm smile she always gave before a procedure. "Let's keep our promise," she said softly. "Moonflowers, and then the ocean." Daniel nodded. "Moonflowers and the ocean," he agreed. The air in the room seemed to hold its breath as they began. The next morning, the palace was awake earlier than usual. Servants moved quickly but quietly, carrying supplies and preparing the room where the treatment would take place. The alien healers and Daniel worked side by side, though their methods were different. The healers used glowing crystals and energy waves, while Daniel arranged small metallic instruments, vials of medicine, and a portable scanner from Earth. It was a strange combination, two worlds meeting over one fragile life. The king stayed close, speaking only when necessary, his eyes fixed on his daughter. He had seen countless healers enter and leave without success, but something about Daniel felt different. Perhaps it was the way he listened to Lyria, or the steady way he moved, never rushing, never panicking. The king could see that Daniel was not only a doctor, but also someone who understood pain, not just the physical kind, but the kind that touches the heart. Lyria herself seemed to have more energy that morning, as if the presence of this human had awakened something inside her. She asked him questions about Earth, what the oceans looked like, how humans celebrated their birthdays, what it felt like to see snow. Daniel answered with quiet warmth, telling her about blue skies, waves crashing on sandy shores, and the feeling of catching snowflakes on your tongue. She laughed softly, and even that small sound seemed to bring light back into the room. Finally, it was time to begin. Daniel explained the plan once more to the king and the healers. His treatment would use a special regenerative serum he had developed over years of research. The serum would need to be combined with the alien's healing energy to activate fully, allowing Lyria's damaged organ to rebuild itself slowly. It was risky. Her body might reject the process, and it could exhaust her completely before it worked. But without it, her condition would only worsen. The king took his daughter's hand and whispered something to her in their language. She nodded faintly and looked at Daniel. "I'm ready," she said. Daniel began carefully, attaching small sensors to her arms and chest. The alien healers formed a circle around the bed, placing glowing crystals in a pattern. As they began to hum softly, waves of warm light filled the air. Daniel injected the serum into a vein in her arm, watching the readings on his scanner. At first, nothing happened. Then, slowly, her breathing steadied, and the energy around her seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. But the process was not smooth. After several minutes, Lyria's body trembled, and her heart rate spiked. The healers looked at Daniel with alarm, but he stayed calm. "She's fighting it," he said quietly. He adjusted the serum dosage, whispering encouragement to her, as if his words could guide her through the storm. The king stood frozen, his hands clenched, silently praying to the stars. Minutes felt like hours. Sweat ran down Daniel's face as he monitored every change. He knew that if her body rejected the serum completely, there would be no second chance. Finally, the trembling eased, and her breathing became steady again. The glow from the crystals grew softer, and the readings on the scanner began to show tiny signs of improvement in the damaged organ. It wasn't a miracle cure. It was the start of a long, uncertain path, but it was enough to bring hope. When the treatment ended, Lyria was exhausted, but her eyes were brighter. She looked at Daniel and smiled faintly. "Thank you," she whispered before drifting into sleep. The king stepped forward, his voice low but filled with emotion. "You have given us something we have not had in a long time. Hope. Whatever happens next, you have my gratitude." Daniel nodded, knowing this was only the first step. "We'll need to repeat the process several times, and she'll have to rest more than ever," he explained. "But her body has responded better than I expected." For the next few days, the palace felt different. The heavy cloud of despair began to lift. Lyria's condition was still fragile, but she had moments of energy where she could sit up and talk. Daniel spent hours with her, guiding her through simple breathing exercises, teaching her how to strengthen her body without overexerting it. The alien healers watched and even began to adopt some of his techniques, mixing them with their own traditions. In the quiet evenings, Daniel and the king would talk privately. The king spoke of his daughter's childhood, how she used to run through the palace gardens, laughing with her friends. He spoke of the day she first fell ill and how the joy in their home had slowly faded since. Daniel listened, understanding that his role here was not only to heal the body, but also to restore a family's lost happiness. One night, Lyria asked Daniel if he would take her to the palace gardens when she was stronger. "I want to see the moonflowers again," she said softly. "They only bloom under the light of both our suns." Daniel promised he would, and in that moment he felt a deep responsibility, not just as a doctor, but as a friend. The days ahead would be challenging. The treatment was working slowly, and there was always the risk of setbacks. But for the first time in years, the king, the palace, and even Lyria herself began to believe that recovery was possible. And somewhere deep inside, Daniel felt that this journey was going to change him too, in ways he had not yet imagined. The galaxy was a vast place, filled with millions of planets, each with its own life and mysteries. On one such planet, far from Earth, there was a great kingdom ruled by an alien king. His people were tall, graceful beings with luminous eyes and skin that shimmered faintly under their twin suns. The king was wise and loved by his subjects, but behind the palace walls he carried a burden heavier than any crown. His only daughter, Princess Lyria, was gravely ill. Lyria had been sick for as long as most could remember. Her illness puzzled the best healers in the kingdom. She was delicate, often too weak to walk without help. Her once bright eyes had grown dim, and the king's heart ached to see her suffering. The palace was always quiet now. Laughter and music had faded, replaced by whispered conversations and worried footsteps. The people of the kingdom prayed for her recovery, but nothing seemed to work. Every new treatment ended in disappointment. The king's advisors urged him to prepare for the worst, but he refused to give up. He loved his daughter more than anything in the universe, and he was willing to try anything to save her. Then one day, a messenger arrived from a distant trading colony with unusual news. A human doctor from Earth had recently arrived in the sector. This doctor was known for performing miracles in places where hope was gone. His knowledge of medicine was unlike anything most alien civilizations had ever seen. Some even whispered that his hands carried the power of life itself. At first, the king was doubtful. Humans were not common in this part of the galaxy, and no one truly knew their abilities, but the desperation in his heart overpowered his doubts. He sent a royal envoy to find this doctor and bring him to the palace at once. The journey took days, crossing dangerous asteroid fields and navigating through hostile territories, but the king's command was obeyed. The doctor's name was Daniel Hayes. He was an unassuming man, with calm eyes and a quiet confidence. When the royal envoy found him, he was treating miners on a distant moon, using tools and medicines unlike anything they had seen. At first, Daniel was hesitant to leave. He had many patients relying on him. But when the envoy explained the situation, the illness of the king's daughter, he understood the urgency. The trip to the alien kingdom was long, but Daniel spent it learning everything he could about their biology. The aliens' bodies were different from humans, with organs and systems he had never studied before. Still, he was determined to try. He knew that sometimes hope was as important as medicine, and the thought of a young life fading away in front of her father's eyes pushed him forward. When Daniel arrived at the palace, he was greeted by a mix of hope and skepticism. The alien healers watched him closely, unsure of his strange tools and methods. The king welcomed him personally, his voice carrying both gratitude and desperation. He led Daniel to the royal chambers, where Lyria lay in a bed surrounded by silken curtains and glowing crystals. She looked fragile, her skin pale and her breathing slow. Yet when she opened her eyes and saw Daniel, something flickered in her gaze. Curiosity. She had heard stories of humans, but she had never seen one. Daniel knelt beside her and spoke gently, introducing himself. She smiled faintly. Though it was clear she had little strength left, Daniel examined her carefully, using a mix of human technology and his own sharp instincts. He took readings, scanned her body, and listened to her breathing. He realized quickly that her illness was unlike anything in human medicine. It was caused by a slow failure in a vital organ unique to her species. The alien healers had been trying to restore the organ's function, but Daniel saw that the problem lay deeper. It was a genetic weakness she had from birth. When he explained his theory to the king, there was silence in the room. No one had ever considered that her condition could not be fully cured by their traditional methods. But Daniel had an idea. He proposed a treatment that combined alien healing energy with advanced human regenerative techniques. It would be dangerous, and no one could promise success. The king's eyes grew wet with emotion. He knew the risks, but he also knew they had run out of time. That night, Daniel stayed by Lyria's side, preparing for the procedure. The alien healers watched him work, fascinated by his precision. Lyria herself seemed calmer than she had in weeks. She told Daniel about the gardens she loved, the stars she used to watch from her balcony, and the stories her father would tell her about distant worlds. He listened quietly, sensing that her strength came not from her body, but from her spirit. As the sun set over the kingdom, the stage was set for something that would change not only Lyria's life, but also the bond between two worlds that had once been strangers. In the silence of the palace, hope began to breathe again.